I'd like to talk about the poison pawn trap. A poison pawn is a pawn that can be taken but shouldn't be taken because it can fall into a trap. In the beginning of the game, poison pawn is the b2 pawn and should not be taken with the black queen. For example, in this position, queen comes to a5 and says check to the white king. White just blocks with the bishop on d2, forcing the queen to move back, and usually does so to b6. Knight can come to c3, and then black can take the b2 pawn. He has now just fallen into the poison pawn trap. White's rook will come to b1, forcing queen only to go to a3. White knight can now go to b5. It attacks the queen and also c7, which forks the king and the rook. But the black's queen has to move. So black's queen has two options. He can take the a2 pawn or he can come to a4. He can't come to a5 because of the bishop on d2. And he can't come to a6 because of the knight going to c7, forking the king, rook, and queen. And of course, the bishop on f1 taking the queen. So, in this position, he has two options. Let's try a2. If he takes a2, rook now goes over to a1. The queen cannot stay on the a file and must now only go to b2. Note he cannot go to c4 because of the bishop on f1, so back to b2 he is. Now white now goes bishop to c3, trapping the queen. The queen cannot take the knight on b5 because of the bishop on f1, and so in this position he would do a desperado. He would take the rook, queen would take the queen, and white would win very easily. So in this position, taking a2 would have been a bad idea. So let's start over again. Queen takes b2, rook over to b1, queen a3, knight to b5. Let's try a4. If queen goes to a4, knight can go to d6 and say check. Note that the e7 pawn can take the knight on d6. But if he does so, the bishop on f1 will come to b5, forking the king and the queen, and will win the queen. So in this case, black would go to d8, because he will not go to a white square because of the fork over here on b5 with the bishop. So he'll go to d8. White can go to f7, forking the king and the other rook now. The king has three options to move, but will not want to go to either one of the white squares, because if he goes to either one of the white squares, bishop on f1 will come over here, like we said, and fork the king and the queen. So he'll come to c7. Bishop can now go to f4 and say check. Note the king cannot come over to here because of the rook over here on b1. Cannot come up here because of the pawn on d5. Cannot stay here because of the bishop and the knight. And doesn't want to go to a white square. And can't go to d8. So he blocks with e5 just to prolong the game. Bishop can take, blocks, bishop can take, and now the king's only move is to go to d7, whereas the white now can bring his bishop from f1 over to b5, forking the king and the queen. The knight can block or the queen can take, and white will take back, and white will win this game very easily. So this is a poison pawn trap.